Kevin Bennett stopped directly in front of me in the courthouse corridor, invading my space with deliberate confidence. His cologne was sharp and expensive, the kind he reserved for moments when he wanted to feel untouchable. He smiled as though the verdict had already been signed. "Today," he said quietly, "is the best day of my life. I'm taking everything." Behind him stood Sophie Lane. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect silence. She didn't need to speak. The curve of her lips said enough. Victory, ownership, certainty. She looked at me like someone already moving into my life. People passed by without slowing down. Lawyers murmured into phones, clerks shuffled files. No one noticed the private battle unfolding in that narrow hallway. Kevin adjusted his jacket and looked me over like property that had finally lost its value. "The condo is mine. The accounts are mine," he said smoothly. "You really should have accepted the settlement. Now you walk away with nothing." I didn't respond. That unsettled him. He leaned closer. "You were always quiet, Laura. Quiet women don't do well in court. My lawyer is aggressive. Yours looks like he should be enjoying retirement." Sophie crossed her arms, letting the gold bracelet on her wrist catch the light. I recognized it instantly. Kevin lowered his voice. "After today, you won't have a home. No leverage, no future." That was when my attorney stepped beside me. Harold Whitman didn't rush or raise his voice. He simply looked at me and asked, "Did you bring everything we discussed?" I met Kevin's eyes for the first time. "Yes," I said calmly. "Exactly as you asked." Harold nodded once and turned slightly toward Kevin. "In that case," he said, "today may not go the way you expect." Kevin laughed. He had no idea. Laura Bennett had never been loud. She had never needed to be. For most of her life, she worked quietly, making systems function and problems disappear before anyone noticed them. She was the person behind the curtain, aligning numbers, correcting mistakes, and ensuring stability. Kevin had mistaken that for insignificance. When people asked what Laura did, Kevin usually answered for her. "She works from home," he'd say casually. "Some accounting, nothing major." It sounded harmless, small, forgettable. In reality, Laura managed financial records for multiple small businesses. She handled taxes, compliance, payroll schedules, and audits, all from a modest laptop at the dining table. She was precise, disciplined, and trusted. She was also the reason Kevin's life stayed effortless. When they married, Laura adjusted her career to support his ambitions. She relocated when his job required it. She took on extra freelance work when his income fluctuated. She believed in partnership, even when the balance tilted unfairly. Kevin saw her adaptability as weakness. At social gatherings, he joked that he was the provider while Laura kept things organized at home. People laughed. Laura smiled politely. No one asked who actually tracked expenses or prevented financial collapse. Quiet people notice patterns. Laura noticed when Kevin started coming home later, when expenses rose without explanation, when affection turned into distraction. She didn't confront him. She observed. The marriage didn't end with shouting or slammed doors. It ended on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Laura stood in their bedroom holding one of Kevin's suit jackets. He'd left it draped over a chair. She planned to take it for cleaning, the way she always did. Out of habit, she checked the pockets. Kevin had always been careless with important things. Her fingers touched a folded receipt inside the inner pocket. She unfolded it. A luxury jewelry store. Total $5,000. Purchased the day before at 2:30 p.m. Yesterday, Kevin had texted her saying he was stuck in meetings and would be home late. Laura sat down slowly. Her heart didn't race, her hands didn't shake. What she felt was colder than panic. She opened her phone and searched for Sophie Lane. Sophie's profile was public. The most recent photo showed a champagne glass inside a luxury car. On her wrist was a gold bracelet with a blue stone. The caption read, "Best night ever." That was enough. The marriage was over. But the accounting had just begun. Laura didn't confront Kevin. She didn't cry or accuse. That night, after Kevin fell asleep, she opened her laptop. Emotion clouds judgment, numbers don't. She created a new file and named it Balance. First, she reviewed their shared accounts. Savings, credit cards, mortgage payments. Kevin had never questioned her access. He assumed money simply appeared when necessary. Laura pulled statements from the last 3 years. The pattern revealed itself quickly. Small charges at first. Restaurants, ride services, gifts, then hotels, flights, jewelry, always during business trips. The expenses didn't align with Kevin's income. Next, she reviewed her own records, the monthly transfers she sent Kevin to cover household costs. She'd always labeled them simply mortgage, utilities, expenses. Now those memos mattered. She built spreadsheets, tabs, categories, one for income, one for joint expenses, one for unexplained spending, one labeled Sophie. Kevin wasn't just cheating. He was financing another life. Every gift, every trip, every indulgence came from money Laura had helped earn or protect. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was restitution. For weeks, Laura lived two lives under the same roof. In front of Kevin, she remained the quiet wife. She cooked dinner, asked about his day, nodded at his stories. Kevin noticed nothing. But late at night, Laura worked. She turned a small storage room into a private office. Bank statements, receipts, digital trails. Kevin hadn't bothered to hide anything properly. The condo came first. Years earlier, Laura had received an inheritance from her grandmother. Kevin convinced her to use it as a down payment, telling her it was easier if it went through his account. She traced the money. Every dollar came from her inheritance. Every cent went directly to the developer. Kevin hadn't contributed a thing. The mortgage told the same story. Laura transferred the payment to Kevin each month so he could make the final transaction himself. What she thought was supporting his pride had become proof. Then came something worse. Large transfers to betting platforms, thousands at a time, always after bonuses. Kevin wasn't just careless. He was reckless. By the end of the month, Laura had something far more powerful than anger. She had evidence. And Kevin had no idea the clock was already running. Laura did not rush into hiring a lawyer. She understood something Kevin never had. Timing mattered as much as truth. She waited until her records were complete, until every transaction had a date, every pattern had a shape, and every lie had a number attached to it. Only then did she ask a former colleague for a recommendation. The name she received was Harold Whitman. His office was nothing like the ones Kevin admired. No glass walls, no modern art, no aggressive slogans framed in steel. Just shelves of old law books, worn leather chairs, and the quiet smell of paper that had seen decades of disputes. Whitman listened. That alone set him apart. Laura explained everything the way she would present a financial report. No emotion, no dramatics, just facts. She laid out the inheritance, the condo, the monthly transfers, the gambling losses, the affair. Whitman did not interrupt. When she finished, he opened the folder and began reading. Minutes passed. Pages turned. Numbers were cross-checked. Dates compared. Finally, he looked up. "You're not here for comfort," he said calmly. "You're here to conclude something." Laura nodded. "You have documentation strong enough to secure what is yours," Whitman continued. "But only if we proceed carefully. Your husband believes he has already won. That assumption is useful." "What do we do?" Laura asked. "We let him underestimate you," Whitman replied. "We allow him to speak freely. Confidence makes people careless." Laura felt something steady settle inside her. Control. Kevin filed for divorce 2 weeks later. He framed it as generous. He offered Laura a settlement that would have left her with minimal savings and no claim to the condo. He acted offended when she declined. "I'm being fair," he insisted. "You don't want this dragged through court?" Laura said nothing. Her silence encouraged him. Kevin told Sophie everything was handled. He promised her the condo, the lifestyle, the security. Sophie believed him. She had no reason not to. Kevin's lawyer was loud and confident, a man who relied on performance as much as preparation. He dismissed Laura as a non-earning spouse who benefited from Kevin's success. Exactly as Whitman had predicted. The court date was set. On the morning of the hearing, Kevin arrived as if attending an awards ceremony. His suit was flawless, his expression victorious. Sophie walked beside him, dressed with deliberate confidence. Laura arrived early with Whitman. She wore nothing remarkable, neutral colors, flat shoes, her hair pulled back. Kevin barely looked at her. In his mind, the outcome was already decided. Inside the courtroom, Kevin's lawyer spoke first. He painted Kevin as the financial backbone of the marriage, a hardworking executive, a generous provider. He described Laura as dependent, supported, and sheltered. Kevin nodded along. Laura kept her eyes on the table. When it was Whitman's turn, he stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "this case is not about narratives. It is about documentation." He began with the condo. He presented the inheritance Laura had received years earlier, the exact amount, the date, the transfer into Kevin's account. the immediate payment to the developer. Kevin shifted in his seat. Whitman continued. He showed the mortgage history, each payment originating from Laura's account before being transferred to Kevin for final submission. The judge leaned forward. Kevin's lawyer attempted to interrupt. Whitman didn't stop. Then came the spending. Flights, hotels, jewelry, all during supposed business trips, all charged to accounts funded by Laura's income. Kevin's face tightened. Finally, Whitman addressed the gambling. Large sums transferred to betting platforms, recurring losses, timing aligned with bonus deposits. The courtroom grew quiet. This was no longer a disagreement. It was exposure. Whitman allowed the silence to settle before continuing. What we are seeing, he said, is a consistent pattern of marital asset misuse. Funds were diverted from shared resources to finance gambling and an extramarital relationship. He placed photographs into evidence. A bracelet, purchased during work hours, worn by Sophie the same evening. Sophie, waiting in the hallway, had no idea her image was now part of the record. Kevin attempted to speak. The judge raised a hand. Whitman moved on. There is also the matter of income representation, he said. Laura Bennett compared reported earnings against deposited funds. The discrepancy is significant. He submitted additional documents. Unreported income, funds routed through third-party accounts, irregular deposits. Kevin's lawyer sat down heavily. We are not pursuing criminal charges, Whitman clarified. But the court must understand that the financial portrait presented by Mr. Bennett is inaccurate. Kevin stared across the room at Laura. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The judge called for a recess. Kevin turned toward Laura as everyone stood. What did you do? He whispered. Laura met his eyes. I kept records, she replied, like I always have. Kevin had no response. Outside the courtroom, Sophie paced impatiently. She saw Kevin's expression change as he approached. Well, she demanded, did it go as planned? Kevin said nothing. Sophie's confidence faltered. She had believed in a future built on certainty. What she saw now was doubt. When court resumed, the judge's tone had shifted. She addressed Kevin directly. You have represented yourself as financially responsible and transparent, she said. The evidence suggests otherwise. Kevin's posture collapsed slightly. The court recognizes the condominium as separate property purchased with inherited funds belonging to Laura Bennett. It is excluded from division. Kevin closed his eyes. The court further finds dissipation of marital assets through gambling and unauthorized gifting. Mr. Bennett is ordered to reimburse Mrs. Bennett for documented losses. Each sentence narrowed Kevin's world. The vehicle remains with Mr. Bennett along with its associated debt. Kevin's lawyer did not object. There was nothing left to argue. Outside the courtroom, Sophie waited again. Kevin approached her slowly. She searched his face. Tell me we're fine, she said. Kevin shook his head. Sophie stepped back as if distance could change reality. You promised, she said sharply. You said there was money. Kevin had no answer. Sophie turned and walked away without looking back. Minutes later, Kevin's phone rang. His employer. The investigation Laura had quietly triggered was already underway. By the time Kevin exited the courthouse, his future had collapsed. Laura walked past him without stopping. Some endings don't require confrontation. On the courthouse steps, Whitman extended his hand. You handled this well, he said. Most people let emotion interfere. Laura nodded. Numbers don't, she replied. She walked to her car alone. Not lonely. Prepared. The courtroom emptied slowly, but Laura remained seated for a moment after the ruling. She wasn't stunned. She wasn't overwhelmed. What she felt was quieter than relief. Completion. Kevin stood near the exit, motionless, as if the floor itself had betrayed him. The confidence he had carried into the courthouse was gone. In its place was a hollow stillness, the look of someone realizing too late that assumptions were not defenses. Laura closed her folder and rose. She walked past Kevin without pausing. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner. The sky was gray but open, as if something heavy had finally lifted. Laura took a slow breath and felt it settle properly in her lungs for the first time in months. Harold Whitman joined her on the steps. You stayed focused, he said. That made all the difference. Laura nodded. Facts don't need volume. Whitman smiled faintly. They rarely do. They shook hands and he returned inside. His work was done. Laura's was just beginning. Kevin sat alone in his car for a long time after Sophie left. He replayed everything in his head, the confidence, the jokes, the certainty. He had believed Laura's silence meant ignorance. He had believed paperwork was insignificant compared to personality. He had been wrong. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Sophie. It was his company's compliance department. They asked him to come in for a meeting the next morning. He already knew what it meant. The discrepancies Whitman mentioned in court weren't new. Kevin had ignored them, convinced no one would ever look closely. Laura had looked closely. By the end of the week, Kevin was placed on administrative leave. The following week, he was terminated. The condo was no longer his. His savings were reduced by reimbursement orders. His reputation, once polished, now carried questions. The future he had promised Sophie evaporated. Sophie never called again. Laura returned to the condo that evening alone. She stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the quiet. Not the tense silence that had once filled the space, but a clean one. Honest, undemanding. She walked through the room slowly. The furniture was the same. The walls hadn't moved. Yet everything felt different. The condo wasn't a symbol of compromise anymore. It was hers. Laura opened the windows and let fresh air move through the rooms. She brewed tea and sat at the dining table with her laptop, not to work, but to plan. For the first time in years, every plan would be her own. In the weeks that followed, Laura closed joint accounts, reorganized finances, and finalized paperwork. She didn't rush. Precision had always been her strength. Kevin tried to contact her once. A single message. "We should talk." Laura didn't respond. There was nothing left to explain. At work, Laura increased her client base. Word spread quickly. She was reliable, thorough, quietly formidable. She didn't advertise herself as someone who had survived betrayal. She simply did excellent work. And people noticed. One evening, Laura received a message from a woman she barely knew. An acquaintance of an acquaintance. "I heard you went through something difficult," the message read. "I'm dealing with financial confusion in my own marriage. I don't know where to start." Laura paused before replying. Then she typed back, "Start by keeping records." Months passed. Kevin downsized to a small apartment across town. The car he'd kept came with payments he now struggled to afford. The confidence that once defined him had softened into caution. He had freedom now, but no foundation. Laura didn't track his life. She didn't need to. Some separations are so complete they don't leave echoes. One afternoon, Laura sat on the balcony of the condo, reviewing investment options. The city below buzzed with movement, people rushing, building, losing, starting again. She thought briefly about the courthouse hallway. Kevin's certainty, Sophie's smile. The way they had believed the story was already written. They had been wrong. Laura closed her laptop and leaned back. Revenge, she had learned, didn't require cruelty. It required patience, preparation, and the discipline to let truth arrive at the right moment. Laura Bennett never raised her voice. She never needed to. She understood something Kevin never did. Power doesn't announce itself. It documents itself. It waits. And when it speaks, it doesn't need to shout. The condo was hers. The silence was hers. The future was hers. Kevin had wanted control without accountability. He got neither. Laura had wanted fairness. She earned it. And that is what real strength looks like. Not destruction, not chaos, but clarity, calm, and the courage to trust the truth to do its work when it matters most.